we have had so much interest from international schools. At present, our funding unfortunately only covers us delivering to UK schools, which is our priority, being government funded in the UK. However, that isn't to say that we might not be able to offer this in the future. One of the issues we're trying to get around or to solve at the moment is how we deliver digital programs or digital services sort of internationally. And part of that is we're battling really with legal things around that in terms of paying VAT in the many countries around the world. So just to let you know, for instance, in our adult talks program, they're currently free. So anyone from around the world can join those at the moment, and they're really brilliant. And I would advise you to, as teachers or students, to look at some of those as well. If we were to charge for them, because over half of the countries in the world attend them, so we have thousands of people attending, there's this real issue in the UK with the payment of VAT, and we've got to get through all of that first before we could, for instance, start charging for those. And I think if we were going to do digital programs for schools internationally, we would have to charge something to do those, and at the moment we can't get around that obstacle. So it's not a no, but we really would love to be able to do that. Also, our team at the moment, we can't cope with even the number of UK schools that want to do this. So our sessions sell out really, really quickly. So we put them online, and they're free because Samsung are paying for those, obviously. We will be talking to Samsung in the future, and obviously we have raised in the past the international aspect of this and the potential for delivering internationally. But it's a kind of resource issue for how many staff we have and all of those things. So, but thank you so much for asking, and we will feed that back. It's definitely our funding, one of our key performance indicators for the museum. So the statistics we need to give back to the government for the funding that they give us is number of children attending school sessions on site. And it's interesting, at the moment, they haven't yet been asking for the digital numbers, but we're trying to encourage them to collect those numbers because we feel they are just as valuable as the in-person visits as well, and it creates that more reach around the country. So so there is that. So yes, it's definitely influence. We have close connections with the Department for Education in the UK. I've also been up to Scotland to talk to them, and I lived in Scotland for 12 years, so very much understand that curriculum there. We're working with Wales, they've got their own curriculum. So it's partly because we need to do that because we are publicly funded, but also it's because we want to do it. We want to make it relevant to teachers. We want to increase engagement, and if we weren't connected to the curriculum, I don't think we'd get as many children coming. So I think it's really important. But like Sam said, we need to make it different from school. That's the point. It's not the same as school. It's like a different experience.
Yeah, that's a really important question to ask. I think for us, it's that you're creating that balance between using digital and also having those objects as well. So we make sure that, like I said, the objects are the focus. So it's still where you get your information from. So it might be that whilst you're using a tablet or a phone, you still need to look at those physical objects. You still need to kind of examine them to get your answers from. What we see in our virtual visits program, it's really popular by those who can't attend the museum. So it means that they would probably never have had the chance to visit the British Museum. So we're giving them that way of engaging with the museum in perhaps not the same way as an on-site, but still in a way that they would have got if they hadn't at all. And what we do see for some of those schools is that they actually say, having done a virtual visit, it has really inspired us to then go and see the objects in person. that we've looked at on the screen. So now they know a little bit more about the museum. Now they know about those objects. It creates that connection that then sort of drives their intention to then come and see them up close and experience them in kind of all of their wonder as well. So we have seen that virtual visits, rather than replacing our on-site programs, actually complement it very well. It accesses an audience that wouldn't previously have engaged with the British Museum, and then can even encourage them to come and visit that as well. Because I think it's important that you can't replicate the on-site experience. You can't completely replicate walking around the gallery, getting the chance to look and potentially handle objects up close that you do compared on-site with online.
Yes. Does Sarah has anything to add on this?
Yes. So I just wanted to say really about how important it is for museums to adopt digital technology. The whole world uses digital technology. Everybody uses it in their homes. It's a really great way that people can engage with culture, with history, with art and design, with all these different subjects. And I think if we don't really invest in making sure that we can enable digital learning to take place and to enhance the objects, then we will be left behind, because there's many other attractions whereby technology is being used really effectively, and we're seeing visitors really asking for this and asking for different ways of engaging and learning, as Sam said right at the start. So I think it's not to be afraid of using digital technology. It is a tool. It's not going to replace the objects. It never will replace the objects. It is a tool. But with the advances in technology, we know just how exciting it can be to actually be able to enhance those objects and to get deeper engagement with them. So an object you might normally walk past all of a sudden comes to life. And I think that is what is so beautiful about the advances in, particularly in mixed reality, in augmented reality, and all of those things, that it can really enhance and create a better interest for people who might just not be interested. All of a sudden we've got all these new people interested and learning. So I think it's got huge advantages.
Yes. We have a sort of related question. It says that what kind of interactive activities that could raise students' interest the most from your experience?
Sam, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. That's a really great question too. I think it's the kind of activities that provide that personalization, give students a choice, so they want to feel like they're having an impact on what they're doing. So we are currently in the process of creating, as Sarah mentioned, some augmented reality tours around 3 of the museum's galleries. So what we're thinking about there, it's based off a previous one. It's about that they can choose which objects they are going to look at first, in what order, which kind of points at the objects they can select and move around and learn about. And what that does, it gives students agency. They feel like they're in control. It's almost like they are the main focus themselves, and it's for them to discover. So I think it can be really effective and important by allowing students to have almost their own sort of authority to go out and learn and discover themselves. I think that's where you're going to get the most kind of engagement, those activities that allow them to explore. So they're not just being told information, they can choose what interests them, because audiences are so varied. We all have our own interests. You might pick out specific parts of an object or specific objects, themes of history yourselves that you find exciting or enjoyable. And by combining your passions with that learning and helping them to kind of link up, those are going to be the activities that create the most interest.
Yeah, speaking of the diverse needs and interests of different students, we have a question asking whether you have some examples of lesson learned, for example, content that you decided to offer, but the students, they don't like it that much, not very well received. So is there any problem or challenges while applying these addressing the needs of and interests of diverse audience?
Yeah, sure. Yes, there's always going to be those points where something isn't sort of amazing straight off the bat. We've done a lot of experiment with ourselves. Some of our on-site activities, we have altered them. Originally, there was quite a long period of one of the sessions where the facilitator would be speaking and talking through lots of different facts about a timeline. And we found that students kind of zoned out slightly from this. So what we did, we broke it up, allowing them to kind of do some different actions. We got them to do a sequencing activity where they were moving around and placing certain events in a sequence, working in teams as well. So you have that competitive edge. And also particularly with our program for special educational needs students as well, we found that that was a very difficult audience to come to the museum because of different sort of considerations, travel time, and things like that. So what we looked at was making our virtual visits more accessible as well, so that they could attend those things. We have also redeveloped our on-site SEN program too. One of the things that I really wanted to do with that was to use more senses and objects in that program specifically. So before, it could be quite difficult when you're just given a tablet and shown these images on a screen of the objects. So what we did is we found objects, different smells, things that they could touch as well, certain audio. We could even change the lights in the Samsung Center as well, and that kind of really increased the immersive feel of that session to make it appropriate for that audience. So yeah, not always when we start with a program does it stay the same. We're always kind of reflecting and using the evaluation from teachers and students on how we can perhaps tweak something or make a change for the better.
And just on that sensory aspect, in the Samsung Digital Discovery Center, which you can see an image of behind us here, that the center was redesigned very recently, and what we did was made sure we included this lighting, which you can see around the ceiling, which we can change to any color. So we can really, and we've got projectors in there, we can show films, we can make it a very immersive environment for when they're actually on site as well. And that has really helped with SEND programs and things like that as well.
Yeah, there are quite a few challenges which involve around kind of the reliability and the testing. So it's what I touched on a little bit in the presentation. It's making sure what will happen if something stops working, or if it does happen, even in sessions that we continue to run, now and again something won't turn on or you'll have an issue. And it's how do you deal with that challenge of that not working, but you still need to deliver that session. So it's really challenging to plan ahead with not only this is what will happen when we use this technology, it's this is what will happen if that technology stops working or if this challenges it. So you're creating these kind of different scenarios when you're planning and using that technology. So facilitators are employed by the museum. In the SDDC, we have a position called a learning producer. We have 3 learning producers who their main job is to deliver these sessions each day. I was once a learning producer myself, and now as education manager, there are 2 of us, and we also have the ability to deliver sessions too. Further around the museum, we have freelancers who are also deliver sessions as well. I think Sarah might touch on those that work a little bit differently. But I think the main advice I would give for training them is probably applies to everyone, which is that it's really important to train your facilitators to think on their feet so they can adapt, but also to stay calm as well. So even if something isn't perhaps working in the way that you want, or it's a particularly difficult question or activity, they're still the ones in control. And keeping that really positive outlook is really important, because it's one of those things where you might have delivered a number of sessions each week, but for that school that are visiting or that you're delivering to, this might be their one and only interaction with the British Museum with that knowledge. So getting them to understand that each session that you deliver should be really special and unique, and putting all of your energy into that. That would be my biggest tip when training facilitators.
Yeah, and really when we're looking to employ these people, we are looking for that teaching experience. So for instance, one of our recent employees who started very recently was a teacher and has come to work in museums, but quite often they've come from museum education, a range of backgrounds. But what we're looking for is they need to have that teaching experience, but they also need to have a love of digital technology. They need to have They need to be confident with it. They need to be able to, they need to have shown that they have created some digital programs, because they are creating programs, aren't they, Sam? I mean, they are putting these together. I saw there was some questions around that as well.
That's right. So the learning producer's main job is to deliver the sessions, but they also contribute to the content as well and making those changes. Because the learning producers are the ones delivering the sessions, they're actually in a way slightly better placed than myself to feed back about what is working, what they find is really effective, and what could be improved. And so what we do is we gather that feedback from them, we make those decisions, and then the learning producers who often have some really good skills in PowerPoint presentation, perhaps they've worked with select schools audiences as well, can contribute that as well. So it's very much a team effort in how we design our programs. Kind of do a mix. So we base a lot of our existing knowledge off the collections online database in the British Museum. But what we do is we make sure that information is suitable for that audience. So we might make those changes. We know about the national curriculum, so we make sure that we are meeting those objectives. And then once we have created the session, once we've developed the content, we send a session to the curatorial team in the correct department. And what they will do, they will take a look over that, make sure that everything is correct, and that all of that information it is right. So it's really working in collaboration with the other departments, using the information that we have existing from the British Museum, and then our own knowledge as well to kind of create these sessions.
I could perhaps answer that, because that's going more into exhibitions.
Yes.
So we have a really strong process for developing exhibitions, and we have guidelines for writing for exhibitions and for developing exhibitions for audiences. And we start right at the beginning with any of our exhibitions with a scope paper, where the curator will have set out the kind of concept and the narrative that they want to tell, and then members of my team will then work with that, think about audiences, how would the curriculum fit with that, what would it work, and it's really a really collaborative process. And the same is really with developing something small like a digital school session. It's a smaller thing to develop, but the same principles apply. It's really that collaborative working together, and there is lively discussion, and I think that's great, and that's all part of it. But we, work very respectfully with each other and respect each other's sort of knowledge around our knowledge of curriculum and their knowledge of the collection and the objects and the cultures, and we therefore come up with some really great solutions between us. So I think because we've done it so many times now, although quite often the curator might be brand new to doing an exhibition, they might be more used to working on, writing a publication, which is quite a different audience, for a different audience. So it is really giving those guidelines. I mean, I've got these are just our text guidelines. For an illustrated, sorry, you can't see that very well, but these are for really giving to colleagues and curators and saying, okay, so these are guidelines for exhibitions, so different from writing a book, and we put illustrations in showing what that looks like. So yeah, we've produced that fairly recently because we found that it's just really helps, because you're constantly having to talk to people. So if you've got a set of guidelines that we can follow and we can all agree, okay, these are the guidelines, then that works. So, but it's all about teamwork and collaboration, and we're creating these things together, which is really exciting.
Most popular sessions are sessions on ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. Those are really popular, down to them being studied at schools, most popular topics to study at school, and also because some of the amazing objects that we have at the British Museum come from those places. But we do also have really popular local history as well. So learning about the Anglo-Saxons and British prehistory, particularly the Iron Age and the Roman Britain, are our most popular subjects too. So what we did when kind of selecting which virtual visits, which on-site sessions to do, we looked at what are those popular subjects, what will be really applicable to the biggest audience, but also making sure that we have some sessions that cater to some diverse histories as well. So we have one on the Indus civilization as well. So it's making sure that there's that variety to offering that choice. So we make sure that we're always kind of basing these sessions with a very popular subject, but also a subject where we have really great objects to demonstrate that with as well. I think we're very lucky in the British Museum having access to so many objects from a number of different places. It means that it's really quite easy in a way to develop a session. But I think some advice for if I was a different museum would be look at your collection and see what works. Have those objects as a basis first, see what topics those objects can be used as, and then how they link as well, because students are visiting your museum to come and see your objects and learn about those things, and that should be kind of the focal point. I think deciding on objects that have a lot of story behind them, if you know sort of the history of that object, if you know about the person who made it or used it, that is really important too. I think that's why in our Decoding Ancient Egyptian Tomb Paintings one, that's really successful, using those paintings, because you can learn about Nebumun, who was buried in the tomb, from these paintings. That's where the information has come, and you can learn about his likes, his dislikes, who his family is. And it's kind of all of those things that create a personal connection. So if you can find objects that have personal meaning to people in the past, but also in the future, those are really important. I think also objects where you can perhaps zoom in on specific details are really nice as well. They don't always have to be really complicated, but if there's something where you can highlight quite a unique or unusual point, those objects are really interesting too. Main reaction is really positive, because particularly for virtual visits, we get a lot of responses saying that it wasn't possible for them to visit the museum because they live very far away, but it's a great way of accessing it. Others really enjoy the digital activities, particularly using the green screen to create their pictures. I think it's really important to have some form of creation that students can take home, or something they've made at the end of a session is really nice as well. We do get one from our virtual visits, which is sort of the most constructive criticism one, the most general one, which is we wish we could handle the objects in person, or we wish we could kind of see these objects up close in person as well. So we are kind of considering how we could do that, whether in the future there's a way of sending an object to a school that they can handle and then see on the screen like a replica, whether we could do more of a guided tour sort of live through one of the galleries and talk about it there. There are all of these options that we're looking at to try and create even more of sort of a personal experience, and if they are actually in the museum themselves.
Yeah, and we do actually create 3D printed objects. We have got some that we use in our schools program on site. So, you know, and it may be that we could provide a service whereby the school could purchase a 3D printed small object, you know, at a reasonable price that they could then interact with in the classroom. I mean, you can use 3D printed objects to interact with augmented reality and things like that. So I think there's lovely ways that in the future we can do that. We have got a specific person in the museum whose job it is to create replicas, which is we're incredibly lucky in that respect. You know, so he's recently created a replica of the Rosetta Stone. So yeah, in the museum, which is amazing, and my colleagues saw it recently and it's incredibly good. So yeah, so there's lots of potential for that as well, I think. Just to recap, like Portable Antiquities Scheme is our scheme to record archaeology found particularly in England. We look after England, and Museum Cymru, they look after Wales. Scotland has their own scheme, and Northern Ireland slightly different as well. Yeah, Sam, we do incorporate this, don't we? Yeah.
We do. This is in our Roman Britain session. So the original session was designed in partnership with the Portable Antiquities Scheme, and it worked really nicely. It tells the story of Dave Crisp, who was a metal detectorist who discovered a giant Roman pot filled with lots and lots of Roman coins, which is an amazing story in itself. So what we do, we teach the students what signs, what things can tell us if something is treasure or not, and learn about these Roman objects, the process that it goes through. They can see kind of the journey of these objects from being excavated in the ground to going to the British Museum's World Conservation and Exhibition Centre and being cleaned and preserved. We get them to do some research. That's where you saw the worksheet with having to decode the Latin writing on the Roman coin to understand sort of where this coin's come from, who does it show, and then we ask them, do they think this collection of objects is treasure or not at the end. So it fits really nicely with that story, also with teaching them about Roman Britain as well, and telling them about archaeology. So whether that means that students then want to go and pick up a metal detector and go out looking for their own, you never know.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, please. Yeah, just to add as well. So the Portable Antiquities Scheme has a website called finds.org. .uk, and it's coming to its end of its life. It's got 1.6 million objects on it, but we are now just starting a project to create a new, more user-friendly, more accessible database and website, so that we hope thousands and thousands more people will use that and be able to discover their local archaeology. But it's interesting to the whole world anyway. It's just fascinating what's found, because these objects have come to Britain from many different countries as well, through the Romans or Anglo-Saxons, and trade and travel and all those things. So it's really fascinating.